NFTs and SoulBound tokens. I have been a geek over SoulBound tokens lately. I feel like it is a very important evolution to what we are talking about in this environment. You have our attention.
I guess we're just going to start by all introducing ourselves, saying what we're doing in the space, and then we'll get into SoulBound tokens and NFTs. So maybe you want to start, Zoe?
Hi, I'm Zoe Wyatt. I'm a partner at Anderson in London. We are a global tax and legal practice in about 150, 160 jurisdictions now. I've been working full-time advising Web3 businesses on their international tax issues since early 2020, and I've built out a team of people, and we are going to be the best crypto tax team in the world, is our plan.
I'm Thomas Lambert. I go by Lambi online. I'm the creative partner at OG Studios, and we're a Web3 agency that builds stuff for brands and organizations on-chain. So we educate them, we build a strategy, the concepts, and then we develop it in-house as well.
Yeah, my name is Jay Iverson. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Germany. I'm an author and also a Web3 content creator. So I create more beginner-friendly content over pretty much all social media platforms for about 260,000 followers right now. My online name is investment_updates if you want to check it out. And that's also going to be kind of my job here today. I'll be introducing the SoulBound aspect of our speech more on a beginner level and give you guys a couple use cases so you understand what we're talking about.
Hi all, I'm Josh Hale. I'm an attorney. I do pretty much only crypto these days, crypto, NFT, blockchain sort of projects. My firm represents anywhere from 2 to 3 dozen projects at a time, and we do everything from like the incorporation aspects of dealing with these international companies that, you know, startups would have been, you know, mom and pop companies just years ago. Now they're global. So we're dealing with the legal aspects and helping build better products for everybody.
Hey, I'm Marc Blinder. I'm one of the founders and CEO of a company called Icon. Our flagship product is ORID, and it's basically an easy login system for getting people that don't have wallets onto blockchains. It's like a cross-chain identity, so the user logs in with Google, Apple, Facebook, something they're really used to. We create a wallet for them in the cloud, and then they can get things like NFTs and tokens. So really excited to be here talking with this panel.
Yeah, I'm just going to start by kind of explaining how SoulBound tokens came along and how they work to you guys. So it all started by the paper being published explaining how SoulBound tokens work, how they're different from NFTs. And it was published by 3 very, very smart people in crypto, NFTs, Web3. One of them being the Ethereum founder, Vitalik Buterin, actually. And in this paper, they explain how it works and how it's different from NFTs. So we're all here for NFTs, so you guys probably know how NFTs work. You can send me an NFT, I'll send it back to you, I'll send it to someone else, or I put it on a secondary market and just sell it off to the public. And this is where the key difference for SoulBound tokens comes in. SoulBound tokens are not transferable, they're not tradable. They are bound to your, they call it SoulBound because it's bound to your soul. Personally, I'd rather call it wallet-bound tokens because the wallet's pretty much your Web3 soul. So it's a lot easier to understand if you call them wallet-bound tokens. And we're kind of going to discuss today why there are use cases where you need a token that's not transferable. And the first kind of example I'm going to start out with is crypto lending. There's a lot of lending platforms where you can get a crypto loan, which I think is pretty amazing that we are so far. But the problem is, as of today, if you want to get a crypto loan, you can only get about 50 to 70% of the money that you put up as a collateral. And that's because we have a problem getting good metrics about how much trust we can put in a Web3 user because everything is decentralized. And now there's a lot of good ways where SoulBound tokens can attack this. And there's pretty much at least how I found 2 stages how they can attack this problem. The first stage being tokenized credentials. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, but a lot of universities, colleges are currently exploring the idea of putting graduation certificates, putting all your records on a blockchain. Now, if we issue these credentials and just certificates as NFTs, we're going to have a disaster. Because if I can have, for example, from the University of Stanford, I'm getting an NFT that I graduated there, I can send it to my friend, I can auction it on OpenSea so other people can use it for their own sake, so that wouldn't make any sense. Now, if we issue these as SoulBound tokens, you can check, okay, it is issued by whatever university you went to, and it's issued to your wallet and only your wallet. This means if you now go to this crypto lending platform, they can already see when you connect your wallet, okay, he has a SBT, a SoulBound token, that he graduated with a certain degree from a university. Now you can get a bigger loan because this lending platform will put a lot more trust in you because you have a great educational record. Now you take your tokenized credentials, go on this platform, you get your loan, you do whatever you have planned with that loan. Now you pay this loan back, you don't miss any deadlines, you make everything perfect. Now this lending platform, which is stage 2 of the SoulBound tokens, can give you a review in form of a SoulBound token. So they can send you a SoulBound token saying, okay, this user has not missed any deadlines, he's paid us back in full, everything was perfect. Now the next time you go on a lending platform, they see, okay, he has a great educational record, but he also has a SoulBound token saying the last time he did lending on crypto, he did everything perfect, so they will put a lot more trust in you. And this is, at least how I found, a very good example of where SoulBound tokens are a lot better than NFTs, and where we need tokens that cannot be transferred or traded on a secondary market. And we've talked earlier, and I think, Marc, you can talk a little bit more about the kind of identification in Web3 and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is always a tension in Web3 is the barrier between kind of privacy and trust, right? So like SoulBound tokens are one of the first ways we have to actually give someone something permanent they can't move, so they can't just create a new identity, right? On almost every blockchain, the wallets are just totally free. So if you ever do anything bad, you create a new wallet and like you've got a totally new identity, right? So with the SoulBound tokens, you can actually attach more permanent value to that wallet that can't be moved out of it. So there's a tension there, right? We want to protect people's privacy at the same time. So we've been talking to a couple different companies about doing on-chain reusable KYC, right? So you'd have done your KYC, showed your passport to an authority figure, get a SoulBound token that proves you've been through the process, but at the same time protects you from revealing any of that PII on-chain, like we were talking about before, right? We want to make sure that no matter what we do, it's both believable and useful as a system of trust, right? Like you were talking about, where you can actually refer back and say, okay, this KYC is real and it's up to date, but also, isn't revealing the user's identity, because privacy is one of the core concepts behind Web3.
So there's a big risk there, though, right? Like, you can KYC a wallet, and let's say I have a wallet and, I die, right? And all of a sudden, that wallet still is KYC'd, and I could, through my will, pass it to somebody in another country and in Iran. Like there's sanctions against people in Iran, but now this person's KYC'd with my identity. So there's got to be something on chain that is beyond just the KYC that identifies the person in an identifiable way, so it's not passable. Now, what that is, it's subject to debate, right? But you could have things like biometrics that are, the point patterns on the face. You could have a bunch of different things that doesn't specifically violate your privacy, but we're going to have something that identifies somebody, because if you don't, then what we've just created is like the KYC Wild West.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's both, right? Because I think you want biometrics so it's convenient for the user and also hard to pass around, although you can, always give people logins to a lot of things. But also, I think it's important that they're time-bound, right? So most people, even if you aren't passing it to someone else, you might commit a crime in the future that puts you on some kind of list, right? A money laundering crime puts you on the money laundering list, right? So you want the SoulBound tokens to come with this kind of timestamp that says, okay, at this point in time, someone vouched for this person passing KYC. And I think you're totally right. It's like you can't just let that be an infinite passport, right? Like my passport has a expiry date,
right,
and all that. And so I think that is one of the really interesting things about how you manage this in a Web3 world, because it is harder.
And this might be an unpopular opinion, but maybe do you need like a centralized way to keep this data? Or,
That's exactly what I was saying outside.
like we have to trust parties to keep some stuff for us as well. Maybe like if you have an ID.
100%. Yeah, because you've got to keep most of the data off chain because the blockchain's not performant enough to put it all on chain. But you just need a pointer that says, okay, this off-chain authority, Oracle, whatever you want to call it, has KYC this person on this date. And then, because you could never do it
And then
all
re-verify.
Yeah, and re-verify when it's needed.
It's the same idea with like medical records, right? You know, like I talk about all the time the idea of weaponization of information. You know, like, you know, I'll tell you guys, I'm pretty healthy right now. So, you know, don't anybody say I have a heart problem. But let's pretend I did, right? And I have this thing on my KYC, I have it on my wallet, says I have a heart problem, but it's encrypted. Well, you know, eventually that's going to get hacked. And now all of a sudden you have insurance companies that won't insure me because they think I have a heart problem. And in the United States, with insurance the way it is, that's a huge problem. You know, like I'd never be able to be insured again. You know, if I get sick, I just die. You know, that would suck for me. And that idea of weaponization of medical information is a huge problem.
But there's probably not a natural segue into tax here, but I'll make one.
Death and tax. Right?
Most of our clients, their biggest issue when it comes to taxes is establishing their indirect tax responsibilities, so VAT, sales tax, goods and services tax. And in many cases, depending on what the NFT is over, they will have an obligation to register for VAT or indirect tax in their customer's location, but they don't know where their customer is. So this would be a nice, if we can get SBTs to work. I mean, unfortunately, it sounds like they're a long way off, but and the issue is real right now, but it would be a good solve to that particular issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology is there, right? A smart contract where you can't transfer ownership, but it's the authority figures I think we're missing more so than the tech, right? It's like, who's going to say HMRC has stamped this wallet as this person, right? Only they can do it.
And they're not set up for that right now.
Yeah, probably not.
I think we probably have to meet like legislators somewhere in the middle, maybe. Like we're maybe against all the KYC stuff, but if there's another legal framework for this, then we're far away off. I think for main adoption or mass adoption. So I'm just curious on how this would work.
Well, I think one of the things I talk about all the time when you're talking about SoulBound tokens, apart from the fact that, you know, the name sucks, is this idea that there is, you can spam a wallet right now. I can send you anything. I could get on AI. I could create a picture of you naked and send it to your wallet as an NFT. It's a horrible thing, but I could do it. And that's the idea.
Imagine it being soulbound.
Well, yeah, exactly. If it's soulbound, now all of a sudden they see how ugly I am naked, right? And that would be horrible for everybody. But no, there's this idea that you have to have a system of permission to tie something to yourself. Because if you don't have some sort of system of permission, you can have your wallet spammed with 1 billion SoulBound tokens, of which have no real reason to be there. And there's things I don't want in my wallet.
Yeah, I'm not a dev, but there might be a solution in like just claiming a SoulBound token instead of just like being made into your wallet. That you approve it to be made. I don't know if you have more input on that.
It depends a lot on the chain, right? Because on Ethereum, it's really not preventable because the token contracts, NFT contracts are isolated contracts, right? So whoever's creating that contract, they can put your name on the list, but it doesn't mean it's worth anything or anyone cares, right? I get spammed with tokens all the time, but they don't even show up in my wallet these days because you'd have to check Etherscan to even find out you were on that spam list. So I think that is pretty solvable at the tech level. And then other chains like Algorand, you actually do have to do an opt-in, and things do actually arrive in your wallet, which makes it much more performant for financial use cases. So but then it has this big UX problem with like having to opt into everything you're going to do before you do it.
I have a really crazy question. I'm going to ask it really loud. From like a criminal perspective, if I soulbound a token to someone and then a tax authority says, wait a second, you didn't claim that, what happens?
So I'm not sure I understand your question.
So I have a very valuable token, and I send it to you. It is now SoulBound. I've valued it at X, right? And I've sent these all out. I've inflated the price, and I've sent you one that's now worth 500,000 euro, dollars, whatever. And you have not claimed that on your taxes.
But
what happens?
Why is it valued at that price if you created it yourself?
Well, but imagine creating a bunch of SoulBound tokens, raising the price of them, and then issuing them to people you don't like.
So doing it deliberately.
Doing it deliberately as an attack.
I guess the question is, what is it? What have you received? Is it an asset? Can you sell it? So by definition, you can't dispose of or sell an SBT. So how would you realize any value from it? So
Yeah.
I think probably wouldn't create a tax.
I think the value is made in the sell of it, right? If it's sold, then you create the value, not if you own it, I think.
But this is an issue
well-
with the spam tokens, right? So the spam tokens, this is a theoretical issue, right? Where you're like, it's an ERC20 token, and I just gave you 1 billion of them, and they're worth something, but it's not that much. I mean, I would say you know a lot more than I do, but I feel like regulators are human beings too, and they wouldn't come after you, right? Because they're like, it's such an obvious scam, but...
But if it's soul-bound, then you can't actually do anything with it. So you can't
but
realize
like the
the value.
non-soul-bound version.
Oh, okay. So okay.
Well, depending on how they build the SoulBound, if you had a build that would allow for disposal or burn, then the question becomes moot, right? Just because something's SoulBound doesn't mean it has to stay with the person forever. It just means it can't be transferred to somebody else. If you had a burn function on a SoulBound token, that would entirely eliminate the question.
Yeah, it's easy to build in, I think, just like to allow only the burn.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the token contract, yeah, exactly. You could put burn, return, whatever, right? Because the whole thing you don't want is to have people transferring them. Yeah, and just jumping back a topic, because you were bringing up these kind of non-legal use cases, because this is really, I think, far ahead of where the market is in terms of law. Right, like the SoulBound token is like in the white paper phase as like, it would be nice if we did something with this with a credit score or KYC. But I think mostly we've seen, at least in my company, it's like the games are first to a lot of these things, right? Even the concept of a SoulBound item, as I understand it, came from World of Warcraft, right? Isn't that where Vitalik got the original name? So like the SoulBound item was a World of Warcraft term. It was like where the brand came from. And so it was an item you couldn't transfer, so that to get the really good items, you'd actually have to play the game. You couldn't just buy your way in. And so, yeah, that said, I think what we'll see is like most of the innovation will start in the gaming space and like fashion. I mean, all the people you see here, right, it's those most cutting edge use cases, art, fashion, gaming, where they don't have as much legal responsibility. And then the finance people will come through later when some of the groundwork has been laid and right, like you're saying, it's like, will we have a standard that everyone can burn their SoulBound tokens or not? Like, I think that's going to be solved by the games and the fashionistas first. And then, the other more regulated industries will be able to come along and benefit from that innovation, I think.
I think one of the biggest problems with the idea of SoulBound tokens today, like for KYC, for example, I can KYC maybe on Ethereum, but I've got a lot of wallets. I've got stuff on Tezos. I have stuff on Polygon. I got stuff on, a bunch of chains. If I KYC on Ethereum, there's no tie to me anywhere else necessarily. And that goes back to what you were talking about of some sort of centralized authority that you can basically say, here are my 10 wallets, here's my sign request showing I own the wallet. Now all of a sudden it's tied to the centralized identity. Yet it's centralized, and that scares a lot of people in this particular market space. That doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means that it may be one of the only solutions currently. Without making all the chains talk to each other in a logical way for the purpose of identity, there's really no other way currently to fix that problem.
Yeah, also the European Union has like their own blockchain concept, EBSI I think it's called, and they also try to mint like diplomas on it. So maybe they do first use case for like an European identity, I don't know. But
Well, with GDPR alone, GDPR is such a huge thing for privacy,
Yeah.
but everything on blockchain is necessarily not private. So could you opt out of your identity, like opt out of your passport according to GDPR regulations? Well, according to law, you have to be able to. That doesn't mean that it's functionally, going to be possible, particularly if you don't have a burn function.
We've got a question there.
Sorry, one question. Do you guys ever heard of zero-knowledge technology?
Yeah, ZK proofs.
Because this is the future with SoulBound.
Yeah, well, because that, yeah, he was mentioning, for those who can't hear, the zero-knowledge proofs, right, is where you can have a mathematical proof you put on chain of something that was checked off-chain, like a KYC or a legal identity, without revealing the information that's behind it, right? So that's how you can protect privacy when you're, dealing with these things. And I think the zero-knowledge proofs are really excellent for that, but you still have this problem, I think, of trusted authorities, right? Like the European Union would have to be issuing a zero-knowledge proof to that user. I mean, potentially you could have other decentralized forms of authority, but typically you would need some kind of known signatory for the other side of the proof that can put it onto the chain, and that protects people, right? Yeah, and to your point, it's like the perfect solution to something like, what about my health records, right? I can put a proof out here that today, at this timestamp, I don't have a heart problem. Here's my proof, and then I can come back in a year and like do it again when I'm renewing my insurance. So yeah, I think the technology's there, but there's a lot of like the kind of business factors or regulatory factors around it that are still to be worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of horrible things right now about being exploited, what happens after death, or even a naked picture of Josh here.
I do
But
not
I just want to bring up kind of more like a fun aspect of SoulBound tokens as well, or like how you can improve your communities. What I was thinking, I was talking to my friend Danielle yesterday, and so there's a lot of conferences like this, for example, like the VCon conference, where everybody who has a VFriend from Gary Vee can attend the conference, and whenever you have one of those NFTs, you get access to a certain exclusive part of this conference. Now, somebody who has maybe at some point owned a VFriend wants to go there too and he has supported VFriends, so why not give them something too that's exclusive? So what I would think would be a cool idea if you have the NFT holders of the VFriends get their exclusive stuff at the conference, but if you at some point hold a VFriend, I think it would be cool if you also get a SoulBound token confirming that you are owning a VFriend or have at some point owned it. So this would make another layer of community. Now Gary Vee could, for example, say, okay, this part of our conference is only for NFT holders, and then we could say there's also a part that is for everybody who supports VFriends, so has at some point held a VFriend and has therefore a SoulBound token confirming this. And this would be kind of a cool way and fun way, I think, of making your community bigger.
I think it would be cool for artists as well, maybe to like tattoo your wallet, that it's undeletable. Sorry, the question was?
So there's the question of just showing the NFT on your phone versus what you're talking about, which is almost like there's the dual, there's like the NFT you currently have, and then this SoulBound echo that you like once had it, if that's not too poetic, right?
Do you know any project which create NFT SoulBound collection? SoulBound tokens?
No, it's. I am not aware of any. I don't know if anyone else is. The question was, has anyone done SoulBound NFT collection yet? And I think it's kind of against the business model that's being used right now, because the whole point of NFT collections right now usually is that they're transferable, sellable. You can buy them, sell them, trade them with your friends. So I don't think we've seen that yet, but I think it's a really interesting idea that like whoever gets it can never let it go. You know, it's like a tattoo, like you're saying.
Yeah, it can be a very cool concept for us.
Yeah, it's a really cool concept.
But it maybe opens the door like to branded spam in your wallet. I don't know. So it has to be a
burn function.
There has to be a burn function, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, It's an interesting way to go, because I could see a lot of the NFTs I have, I will never sell because I bought them just because I thought it was a cool art piece, and I really didn't have a sense that I would ever profit from it, and I probably won't, right? And so maybe you could play into that with that kind of a SoulBound from the beginning, non-transferable approach. One other thing, sorry, that you were talking about, we've talked to a lot of companies in the kind of luxury goods space, whether it's alcohol or fashion or handbags, all that kind of stuff, sneakers, and they have this really big problem which everyone wants to attach an NFT to their goods, but then like what happens when you sell the bag? Does the NFT go with the bag? Can you sell the NFT separately from the bag? Do they have to be attached to each other? And like what you're talking about with the dual NFT, where you have the transferable one and the permanent one, that's actually a really interesting solution to that problem that I'd never thought about.
We have a number of clients who do that. So they'll issue an NFT which has a digital image, and you can redeem it for a physical item. And then when you redeem for the physical item, a new NFT is created that gets attached to your wallet, and then you can't sell that, and you can then get the item delivered to you. So kind of it splits. Yeah. But they do it in different ways. But
yeah, exactly. We got one we're working with that was like funded by SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's like you buy a ticket and then you go on this space voyage, right? And so all these things happen to you. But yeah, that's built to be kind of transferable, but it is the same redeeming functionality like you're talking about. It's like, oh, we send it in, then you get the real NFT later, and like you can't transfer the ticket, but you could transfer what you end up with at the end of the adventure. So, but those are some, yeah, it's really interesting, all the different permutations.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that when it comes to SoulBound tokens, we are very early right now, and there's a lot to be figured out. The thing I think is most interesting, what Zoe was talking about earlier, is how do we classify if a SoulBound token is a digital asset, or how can we classify it? So, sure, you want to?
Yeah, just weaving tax back in again. So yeah, is it an asset? We know we can't, as I said earlier, we can't dispose of it, so you're not realizing a disposal gain, but the data that it holds you could exploit. So your medical records, you could license to Pfizer, for example. And then, so what do you then have coming back? How do we classify the return on the exploitation of the data? And we have to just go back to first principles, which we have to do with all aspects of crypto tax, whether it's crypto-to-crypto transactions, staking, NFTs, etc. So I don't have the answer, I'm afraid.
But is there a difference in between exploiting of a normal NFT instead of the SoulBound token then?
No, I don't think so. Well, in a normal NFT scenario, well, I say normal, there are so many different use cases. So each time we're looking at what are the attributes of the NFT. So if it's just a digital image, then there will be specific tax rules that apply to that. But if it's over a real world good, there's different tax rules that apply again. So it will be the same for, yeah.
And one other use case that I think has been kind of under talked about today, so I just want to throw it out there, is that's very tax relevant, is I think one of the most common use cases for the future in SoulBound tokens will actually be SoulBound tokens in the sense that you're not allowed to transfer them, but the authority figure is. So an example of something that works this way in the real world is like the title to your house. You can't actually transfer the title to the house without reporting to the government that, oh, I've sold this house to someone else, right? And then the government changes that title record. So that's an example of something that when it's put on the blockchain, which it obviously should and will be in most countries, that NFT for the title of that house should be a SoulBound NFT that's transferable by the government, but not necessarily the individual, right? So that way they can still maintain enforcing the tax on transfer, but they are allowed to transfer it, you're not. So I think that's going to be like probably one of the most common SoulBound use cases.
There's already several projects working on title to properties, and what they're doing is they're inserting it into like an LLC. So the whole property may be a fractionalized token, but what you're actually getting when you buy into it is a fractionalized version of the title through percentage owned in an LLC. kind of difficult to do in the United States because of securities law, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be done anywhere in the world. There's ways to do that in other places because the laws are different. So it's already starting, and the interesting thing, what you're talking about is like the tax on transfer. There may not be a tax on transfer when you're buying into an LLC. So that changes that entirely. You know, once you have a bunch of properties in the LLCs, now there is no major transfer, like for purposes of real estate transfer. It's purchasing a company that owns the asset, which I know you'll have thoughts on.
We can't, in the UK, you're penalised if you have a property in a company, so you end up paying like higher stamp taxes. So I'm not sure that it would necessarily be an option here. But I actually prefer the idea, why can't we just have NFT over property and just sell the NFT? So you don't update the land registry because you didn't sell the property, you sold the NFT instead.
So that's a really cool idea, and I think it'd be awesome. But what happens when you have a property that don't have all the proper disclosures? You know, somebody was murdered in this house, but they didn't tell anybody, right? Like, I know I'm the lawyer, so I'm thinking of all these horrible things, right? But if you don't have the proper disclosures, this $1 million property may only be worth $20,000. And you have to be able to rescind the contract, and if you're not able to, a la immutability with blockchain, you're just screwed.
So just in honor of Halloween, which just passed, by a show of hands, who wants to live in a murder house? Only a couple. All right. And people would prefer not to have a murder house in your disclosures.
It's a requirement under U.S. law that you disclose.
Yeah.
Right.
Looks like equal votes for or against murder houses. But yes, you should definitely disclose it.
Okay, guys. We're running over time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
for
so
listening.
much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing.